Two drivers pull out of the same yard on a Monday morning. Same company, same model of truck, same kind of freight. By Friday night, both of them have run around 2,500 miles. And when the settlements land, one of them is nearly $400 better off than the other. Neither of them did anything wrong. Neither broke a rule. Nobody made a mistake in payroll. Search what a truck driver earns and you'll get a number. The latest official federal figure puts the median for heavy and tractor-trailer drivers in America at just over $57,000 a year. That number is accurate. It is also close to useless, because in trucking, the headline salary tells you almost nothing about what actually lands in the bank. By the end of this, you'll know exactly where that $400 went. And there is one specific line on a driver's settlement sheet that explains most of it. Something almost nobody outside this industry has ever heard of. I'll come back to it, I promise. But it won't mean anything until you understand why trucking pay was built this way in the first place. And that story starts with a law signed in 1938 that is still shaping every paycheck in the industry today. This is cab life. So, why per mile and not per hour? Go back to the early 1900s and piecework was normal across American industry. Factory hands, mill workers, miners, all paid by output. So much per piece is so much per ton. Nobody thought it was strange. For a truck driver, the unit of output was obvious. You got paid per mile. Then two laws landed 4 years apart. In between them, they built the system that still runs today. In 1935, the Motor Carrier Act put interstate trucking under the Interstate Commerce Commission. The ICC controlled who could operate, which routes they could run, and crucially, what they were allowed to charge. 3 years later, in 1938, Franklin Roosevelt signed the Fair Labor Standards Act. This is the law that gave America the minimum wage and time and a half overtime after 40 hours. It is the foundation of modern American working rights, and truck drivers were carved out of it. The carve-out is called the motor carrier exemption. In the text, it's Section 13B1. And the logic was that because the Department of Transportation already regulated how many hours a driver could work for safety reasons, the Labor Department didn't need to regulate their overtime as well. One agency, not two. That exemption is not history, it is still law. Today, if you drive a commercial vehicle over 10,000 pounds in interstate commerce, your employer is not federally required to pay you a cent of overtime, no matter how many hours you work. And here's the part that surprises people. At the time, almost everybody was happy with this. Drivers themselves often preferred it because the roads were empty and a good driver could out-earn an hourly wage comfortably. Roosevelt wanted as much freight moving as possible, and the carriers loved it, for the obvious reason. Under piecework, you only pay when the driver's producing. An idle driver costs you nothing. But look carefully at what was holding that arrangement together. The exemption was tolerable because the other half of the system was still in place. The ICC was setting the rates. There was a floor under the whole industry. Carriers competed on service, not on how cheap they could go, which meant there was a limit to how far driver pay could be squeezed. And then, in 1980, that floor was deleted. In 1980, President Carter signed a second Motor Carrier Act, and this one did the opposite of the first. It deregulated interstate trucking. Barriers to entry came down. Rate controls were loosened. Hundreds of new carriers flooded in, most of them non-union, all of them competing on price. The effect on rates was immediate and brutal. Truckload freight rates fell around 25% in real terms between 1977 and 1982. Federal Highway Administration figures tell the longer story. Measured in constant dollars, revenue per truck mile went from roughly $2.95 in 1980 down to about $1.55 by 1999. Nearly half gone. When the money coming in falls that hard, the money going out to drivers follows. The economist Michael Belzer, a former long-haul driver himself, documented this in his book, Sweatshops on Wheels. published by Oxford University Press. His finding was that real median driver earnings dropped by roughly 30% in the decades after deregulation, and that non-supervisory driver pay fell almost 27% in real terms between 1978 and 1990 alone. Not a slow drift, a collapse inside a single decade. Now put the two halves together, because this is the whole answer to why trucking pay works the way it does. In 1980, Congress removed the rate floor, but Congress never removed the overtime exemption. The protection was deleted and the carve-out was left in place. Two laws that used to balance each other, and now only one of them is standing. Which brings me back to that line on the settlement sheet. Because once you are paid per mile instead of per hour, a very awkward question appears, and it's one that almost nobody outside this industry thinks to ask. Who decides how many miles you drove? You'd assume the truck does. It has an odometer, it knows. But in most of American trucking, that is not the number you get paid on. There are 3 different ways to count a driver's miles, and the gap between them is where the money quietly goes. The first is hub miles. That's the real number, straight off the odometer. The word hub comes from the hubodometer, a mechanical counter that used to be bolted to the axle back when engine odometers weren't trusted. Hub miles are every mile the truck actually turned a wheel. Almost no carrier pays this way. The second is practical miles. A routing program works out the sensible route a truck would genuinely take, sticking to roads a 53-foot trailer can legally use, and pays on that. It's close to reality. It's the fairer of the 2 common options. And the third is where it gets interesting. Short miles, known in the industry as HHG, which stands for household goods. Here's where HHG came from. It was built by the Department of Defense as a way of capping what the government would pay to move a serviceman's furniture between bases. It was never designed as a wage system. It measures zip code to zip code on the shortest theoretical route, ignoring whether a truck can actually get down those roads. And carriers still use it to pay drivers today. The difference is not trivial. Depending on the lane, HHG typically runs 5 to 15% short of the miles the driver actually covered. Drive 1,000 miles, get paid for 900. Those 100 miles still cost you fuel, hours, and tire wear. They just don't appear on your check. Sit with the scale of that. If you're losing 5% of your miles, you are effectively working around 15 full days a year for free. At the high end of the range, it's a lot worse than that. And the driver often has no idea because the paperwork only ever shows the paid figure. The odometer is telling the truth in the cab, and nobody is reading it. That's your $400. 2 drivers, same miles, different carriers, different mileage standard. But mileage is only the miles you drove and weren't paid for. Now let's talk about the hours where the wheels never turned at all. Every driver knows the feeling. You hit your delivery window on time, you check in, and then you sit. The industry convention is that a shipper gets 2 hours of free time to load or unload you. 2 hours where your truck is theirs, your clock is running, and you are earning nothing. Past that, detention pay is supposed to start, and on paper it looks reasonable because the carrier typically bills the shipper somewhere between $50 and $90 an hour for holding that truck. Here's the thing. That money is billed by the carrier. It is not automatically the driver's. Where drivers do see detention pay, it's often a fraction of the invoiced rate, and many agreements cap it at $200 or $300 a day, no matter how long you actually sat. Research from the American Transportation Research Institute found that less than half of detention charges even get collected. Federal regulators have put a figure on the damage. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration estimates detention costs drivers between $1.1 and $1.3 billion a year in lost wages. Government Accountability Office work found nearly 59% of drivers had been detained in the previous fortnight. This isn't a rare event, it's the job, and it isn't only a pay problem. A 2018 report from the Department of Transportation's Inspector General found that a 15-minute increase in average time spent at a facility raised a driver's expected crash rate by over 6%. The reason isn't complicated. Your 14-hour clock doesn't pause because a forklift driver went to lunch. Burn 4 hours at a dock and you have 4 fewer hours to earn, so you push harder and later to make it back. Then there's Deadhead. Empty miles run to reach the next load. Typically 15 to 20% of total miles, and many carriers pay a reduced rate for them or nothing, which is how a driver on 68 cents a mile can take home less than 1 on 65, because only one of them is paid on every mile. So what about buying your own truck and escaping all of it? This is where the biggest number in trucking does the most damage. When you see $250,000 a year attached to an owner-operator, that is gross revenue. That's the invoice, not the income. The American Transportation Research Institute's latest analysis put the cost of simply operating a Class 8 truck last year at $2.34 a mile, the highest figure they have ever recorded. Strip out fuel and it's still $1.85. So what's left? ATBS keep the books for tens of thousands of owner-operators, and their average net income for last year came out around $71,800. Maintenance alone averaged over $14,000. The top third do considerably better, near $166,000, but those drivers are almost all deeply specialized, hazmat, oversized, government freight. Becoming an owner-operator isn't a pay rise. It's converting a wage into a small business, with every cost and every risk that comes with one. And here's what I find genuinely interesting about all of this. None of it was ever compulsory. Nothing in that 1938 exemption required anyone to pay by the mile. It only meant they didn't have to pay overtime. Carriers were always free to pay hourly, and some do. Look at a UPS feeder driver under the Teamsters contract. Same Class 8 truck, same roads, same freight, and a top rate approaching $49 an hour with a guaranteed day and overtime at time and a half. That gap has nothing to do with trucks. It's about who was at the table when the pay model got written. There is a bill that would change the law itself, the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act. It would simply delete the exemption. It's been introduced in 2022, again in 2023, and again in 2025, and it has never made it out of committee. The Teamsters and the Owner-Operator Association back it. The American Trucking Associations oppose it, arguing it would upend a pay model that's worked for 85 years and could actually cut driver take-home. So when someone asks what a truck driver earns, that $57,000 figure isn't wrong. It's answering a different question. It tells you what the miles paid. It tells you nothing about the hours behind them, the miles driven but never counted, or the afternoons spent sitting at a dock for free. And that gap isn't an accident. It's what happens when one half of a 90-year-old bargain gets repealed and the other half is left exactly where it was. If you got something out of this, hit subscribe, because there's more coming, and I want to hear from the drivers. Per mile or per hour, which would you rather be paid? And what does your carrier count your miles on? Drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching.